Hi, Sri. I think you're muted at the moment.
Thank you, David. Welcome to the September IT Documentation Users Group webinar. I'm Sri, the Community Manager at Eureka Process. The IT Documentation Users Group comprises of people from all over the world, different functions, different fields, different industries, but all interested in the art of IT documentation. We will be running this webinar for 30 minutes, but it is by no means a hard stop. Please feel free to ask questions in the comment box of wherever you're watching from, and we will address them either as we go along or during our wrap up Q&A. So today's webinar will be about getting to be more efficient with your network diagramming and specifically using Visio for that. We have with us David Cuthbertson, who did a webinar on a similar topic with us some time back, which was incredibly helpful to a lot of people. Got a bunch of really good feedback. So I'm very excited about this. And he's nothing short of an expert in this space and very involved in the direction that the industry is moving in. David, over to you.
Thank you, Sri. If you could just indicate you can hear me okay. Brilliant. Good. Okay, then I'll share my screen and we'll move on from here. So let's just go share screen. And what we should have is my screen being shared at the moment. We'll come back to that as we're going along. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with just simple Visio type techniques and things, just so that anybody who's either used Visio for some time and has never had anybody show them things, or somebody who's quite new can understand what it's all about. This will be using the Visio Professional, or also known as Microsoft 365 Plan 2. So this is the desktop version rather than web version. Having been using Visio for many, many years, when Microsoft introduced the online collaborative version of Visio, there's so many things it doesn't do that actually not many people have adopted it, because the desktop version is so much superior in terms of ease of use, but also functionality. So I'll start with a few things here at the moment. I'll just hide that from the screen. And the first thing we'll start with is just looking at the menu option that you see at the top. Okay. So you can recognize the version that you have. The one you really want to make sure you have is you have a data tab at the top there, because a lot of the work with Visio we're doing with IT systems is all going to be involved in often using spreadsheets and configurations, and having the data tab there gives us a whole possibility of not having to draw that much and not having to type very much either. There's a lot of automation that can be done. You should see that you have a developer tab, and not many people realize that when Visio was purchased by Microsoft, they hid away a lot of functionality and didn't necessarily make it easy. And the first thing that I recommend anybody who has Visio does is they make sure that they have this tab. If you don't have this showing, and the reason for having this is quite often a lot of Visio shapes have inbuilt properties which you want to remove. They've got restrictions on them because they've come from a manufacturer, or you've acquired them in some way, and you can't size the shape, or there's certain things you can't do with this. So the first thing is just enable some of the functionality that you probably never knew you had. The way you do this is you go to File, you go to Options at the bottom left-hand side, and you get the various Visio options you see here. And what you want to do is go to the Advanced Options and scroll right down to the bottom. I did say they hid it away. And you just run in developer mode. Tick that box. When that box is ticked, you will then have the developer option here, which allows you to do many things. And just as a simple example, if I drag this switch and put this onto a page, because I've selected something, you'll see there's many options. The things on the left-hand side is what my own company, Square Mile System, does, where we're doing specials for people, and we'll show you a few things you can do with that, just for awareness. But the main one here is this one here called protection. Every Visio shape can have protection on it. And what you can see here is you can add protection if you want to lock a diagram or lock shapes. And you can see there, you can stop it being edited in terms of that shape. You can stop things being deleted. You can protect the text from changing. There's a number of things which you could add. But the reason for showing you this is often when you do diagramming, you may use or acquire shapes that have some of these protections built in that you want to remove. And so this is how you remove it. You use it using the developer mode. When you also start with developer mode, and you have this option shown here, whenever you do a right click on a shape, you'll see there's an option there that you've never probably seen before called Show Shape Sheet. If I click on that, what that does is that exposes all the programming interfaces, which you can go and look at. And as you can see that we have down here, we have all these boxes on the left-hand side which control the colors, the shapes, the symbols. So if anybody wants to get into programming or doing anything, you can get free of charge from Microsoft a toolkit that allows you to create various utilities and things to go in there. But that's what the macros work on. So if I go back into our main diagram, so that's the first thing, is start well, make sure you've got something there. The way that Visio works is when you actually start Visio, you have what's called a template, which really is a collection of things such as a page size. It also has maybe stencils associated with it, and you can design your own templates so you don't have to start from the beginning every time with the Microsoft way. So just as an example, if I do File, New, what I'm then presented is a series of templates that you see here, all organized to go into different areas. So if I go into the network area, I have templates which will set a page scale, a page size, units, but also has a number of stencils, which is collections of shapes. So if we went into, say, a rack diagram as an example, you'll notice that we have to choose metric or US units, depending on the country you're in. And you can see the format is going to be portrait mode because most things are going to be set. So you can see here, in fact, it's come up as landscape on mine. And we would drag in, and we've got on the left-hand side a range of different stencils there for us to be able to choose and do things. You can design this yourself, and you can also make up your own stencils. I'm not going to cover that in this. You can get Visio books and other things. What I'm going to be covering is the more practical side of using Visio in the IT context. But the first thing to be aware of is, prepare yourself, create your own shapes, be very careful about using other people's or even the Visio shapes themselves. I'll give you an example. I've created this rack diagram, and if I look on the top right-hand side, we can have layers, just as you have with CAD diagrams, and we can look at various layers. And as you can see, there's no layers on this diagram at the moment. Typically, as you would do with a floor plan, where you may be showing office furniture and partitions and other things. Layers are used a lot in CAD type systems. You notice we don't have any. We can create our own if we wish, and I'll show examples of that later. But let me show you the option if I drag in or bring in some shapes from somewhere else. Say I'll do maps and floor plans, and I'll bring in something that's going to show an office layout as an example. So I'll bring in walls, doors, and windows, and I'm going to drag in a room and put it on the floor plan there. So there's a room. I might have doors, so I'll put a door on there as well. If we now look in layers, you'll now see that those shapes had associated with them various layers, which you didn't realize. And this can foul up anything that you're trying to do because there isn't consistency. So if you are doing things, remove all these layers, make your own stencils, because now I've got a building envelope, a door, and a wall. Which one do I use to turn off the door? Well, you would probably say, let's turn off the door from here and apply. And you'll notice that we can still see a door because actually this shape is also assigned to a building envelope as well. And that's the only way. So actually there's a lot of inconsistency. So the main thing there is keep it simple, and you won't spend a lot of time trying to work out what Visio is doing. It's just that it's quite a mature product. There's a lot of things in there. So just to be aware, and I will make use of layers and a few other things as examples of how to do things, but how to control them. but we only have a few minutes. So what we're going to do first of all is, assuming you have symbols and shapes here, how do you create a diagram? And we'll do as a network diagram with the minimum of effort. And by that, I mean, you don't want to type anything. You don't really want to spend any more time than necessary. And quite commonly, you may actually start saying is all I want to do is represent an existing environment, but I've already got an inventory list. I maybe have a patching list of information of how things are all connected. And Visio will allow you to create shapes from data. Then let me show you how. The first thing is to say that here I have a diagram, I have some symbols here, and the symbols can be anything you want. It could be blank shapes or symbols. So if we go to the Data tab, we have options here to link to an external data source. And I'll do it the slow way to start with. So I'll do a custom import, which allows me to link to an existing Excel spreadsheet that I may have a list of all the switches and routers and servers, PCs, but it could also be a list of floor boxes. So I could put them on here. But there are other options as well where I may want to link it to something that is a SQL database or has ODBC connections. So let's do yes. The next thing we want to do is find an Excel spreadsheet that we want to use as a starting point. And it doesn't have to be a particular format. There are some things that make it useful if you follow some rules, and I'll just discover those. So if I go into here, I've got a list of spreadsheets, I've got a list of cabinets, I've got a list of things. Here I've got an inventory list. If we do open, and then we do next, and it prompts us as to which tab in the spreadsheet do you want to use. There could be multiple tabs. In this case, I've only got one. And the first row is going to contain column headings with all the configuration data about things. And you'll see it in a moment. The next option is the spreadsheet could actually have multiple customers, or could be of the whole world, all the switches in the world. So you can filter out some of the data. So this just shows you what's in there. And we could filter out various columns. We might not want the IP addresses, but you might have passwords and things, because we don't necessarily want everything. Or we could actually filter out the actual data itself and then filter out various rows, because we may have a very limited scope. So the first lesson really I want to try and get across is a diagram is always a filtered view of data. A network diagram isn't the whole network. It's typically just the network devices, not the servers and all the other things that are attached to it. And it doesn't have all the cabling, and it doesn't have all the other components that make things up. So you're doing a representation of some of the inventory to do a network diagram, just as you would do a storage diagram with servers, as an example. But I'll just move on. Next. One of the things is we can also refresh the diagram from the spreadsheets. So you get the option to say, what's the unique reference, like the name of a device, the serial number, maybe an IP address, so that I can refresh from the data, from the spreadsheet or the data source in the future sometime. And I'll just click on next. It's recommended the name is probably a good one. And having done that, it has brought in that spreadsheet and exposes it. And what it does, it effectively takes a local copy of the spreadsheet into the diagram and stores it there, so that when we do a refresh, it will actually synchronize with the original data source and actually bring in and actually refresh if there's any changes in devices or configurations. Okay, and as you can see there, I didn't have to type anything. I've exposed all of the information there, and I can just show it out. And then a number of different ways to do things. You might start with a device, like I have a device like here. I have a switch on the diagram. And if I do a right click on here, you can embed data into shapes, very much like all the data you see there. And you can type this in manually, but if I just drag across switch 1 by doing a left click, drop on the top there, and you see there's that blue bounding box. That will not just move across, it will also create all the field names and things for you as well. So I've transferred all the knowledge of what's in the spreadsheet into that device, and we'll see how we can use that in a moment. That's one way of doing it. A quicker way, which I'd recommend, is you select on the left-hand side what you want, and then you do shift and click to select, and you drag across 3 switches. And it's, as you can see, it's showing that those are all linked. So I could do the same with servers. I could drag across 3 servers like that, and I could take routers or routers and drag those across. And so in each of these, as you can see, we have information on all of these about the servers, which has come from the spreadsheet. I didn't have to type anything. What you saw there can also be applied to connectors as well. So I can take a data source. So let's bring in, I'll do a quick import this time. I'll take one I've already done. So it's already got all the filtering and other things. I'll just bring in the connections spreadsheet and do done. And so what you'll now see is there's 2 tabs at the bottom, one for the equipment inventory, and now I have a connections list. And you can see I've got the, just click on that. We've got connection IDs, ports, and various other things. So if I take a connector like this one here, I can either drag across or do that shift-click approach, and you'll now see that this connector here has the port names, the cable IDs, VLANs, and various other things in there. And this connector is a special one that we developed. If anybody wants this, if you contact us, squaremilesystems.com, just go onto our website. We'll then give you a list of utilities which we've developed just to make diagramming quicker. They're free, don't cost anything, and you can freely distribute them if you want. This special connector that we did basically is designed to show port names, as you can see, but we can also hide them all. There's some special controls to remove clutter. So that's the first thing. I've not had to type anything, and I've transferred things I would often cut and paste. If you have data in shapes, Visio has another feature called data graphics. And what data graphics allows us to do is to take out data and display it visually as text or to color code and show it in many other ways. And I'll show you some examples of that. I'll show you, in fact, I'll show you just a quick way what I would use this thing called data graphics. And it's under the data option here on the right hand side called advanced data graphics. We can have a number of different data graphics, so you don't have to have just one. And if I just select this one, you'll now see it's easy to see all that configuration data. And I've designed it to put the names of the devices above the shapes and the IP addresses below them. And you can do that whatever way you want. You can mix and match. If I go back to this advanced data graphics, I can edit this. And it's just showing you, show the name displayed in the center above the shape, show the IP address in the center below the shape. I can change these. So I could take this, for instance, and say I don't want it there. I actually want it below the name. So rather than below the shape, let's put it above the shape as well. And it will, in order of precedence that you see there, it will put the name at the top, and then the next one down will be the IP address. And I've now just changed the visual look very easy and simply. And that's just a simple example of data graphics. There are many other ways to do this. And as I said, we can use color coding and other things, but I haven't had to type anything. The same also applies to connectors, although what we found with connectors is it's probably easier just to show all the connections on the ports that you see there. So, and then we put little yellow dots here so you can just reposition just by dragging and holding. And this way we could then select these and link them all together.
David, we have a question from Facebook.
Yep.
It says, can you repeat where to request utilities, I think utilities, to make drawing easier?
Yeah, it's squaremilesystems.com. I think if I just...
I'll throw that on a ticker along the...
Yes, throw on a ticker, that's probably going to be the easiest thing.
Yeah.
And what those utilities do, in fact, I'll show a couple of them, is one is we have these special connectors to show VLANs and power, and also to do alignments and other things. The other thing is that you'll get an added into the ribbon, which is an executable file, which will then do various other things. And so, like, you can see there's different things there, doing drill down diagrams. So I can create a high-level network diagram of maybe Canada, and then drill down into each town to other diagrams, but they can all be quite separate from each other. This one here is for maybe doing data center floor tiles. I'll show you an example one. This one called Apply Data Graphics. So you've seen how we can have a data graphic that applies things like this. There's one slight problem with it. If you have multiple pages in a diagram, you have to apply them one at a time. So let's show you an example of that. Let's just go to utilities here. Here I have a whole load of rack diagrams that you can see. And what we've got here is a tab for each rack in a computer room. So if on the bottom, if I click on each different tab, you'll see I'm moving along. And if I want to apply a data graphic, I could do it manually by selecting everything that's there, all of that equipment. Using the same process as before, I go to Data, I go to Advanced Data Graphics, and I've got two options. This one here, as you can see, I can select, and that puts the type of device on the left-hand side, because you may not recognize what it is, and the IP address. And that's really useful. I didn't type anything. And it's because all of these shapes have got data, which has come from a spreadsheet or a database with all sorts of information. But all I really wanted was the IP address. But with all the data I've got on the right-hand side, I can do other things with that as well. So I might want to actually select and show the status. You see all these ones at the top there. And I'll go to this page because I think I've got different things there. And I'll do an advanced data graphic where I bring up by color. And I'll show with a little icon here which of these devices are live and which ones have been decommissioned and which ones are actually not there yet. They're planned and things, or they're spare. Just an example. So you can use this to show status. And I'll cover how they can do this in a moment. The difficulty is I have to go to each one of these tabs and actually select everything and then apply the data graphic that I want. Saves a lot of time, but not if you have a lot of diagrams you want consistency. So what this utility here does, Apply Data Graphics, is it just does this in an automated way. So what it does is it scans all the various diagrams, comes up and says this is how many tabs you have. These are the data graphics. So this one here will get rid of any data graphics you may have that people may have put in there if you're sharing your diagrams and documents with everything. So it's just running through all the various tabs that you see at the moment. And then what I'll do is, having cleared everything and made it all nice and neat, what I'll now do is I'll now apply, in fact, I'll just show you working away. I'll now apply the equipment type, which brings out the equipment type and the IP address. And you can see what it's basically doing. It's a quick way to update 50 or 60 diagrams and make them all consistent rather than you having to type anything. So it's a type of Visio automation. And I might want to show different things. You can use it for anything. Network diagrams, floor plans, rack layouts, whatever. But that's one of the utilities. There's a few others, but a lot of this is all about often dealing with not just one or two diagrams, but maybe lots of them. And I want to represent them all. If there's any questions, Sri, if you can come in, I'll just concentrate and carry on with what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, I'll give you a shout. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Let me show you examples of other types of data graphics and what you can do. And so this is just a demonstrator file we have of different ways of using Visio. I could select all of these different shapes that you see here, and I could do it manually by doing Data, Advanced Data Graphics, and I could choose a data graphic, which would maybe apply to all of these. So you can see now I've got the name of the device above, the model number, and the IP address below. Another option is to actually, I'll just take all of these and then clear them like that. Another option you have is to also use that programming interface and create a macro that will actually go and do it for you. So here you can see by typing that radio or clicking that radio button, I have changed the properties. If I select none, that clears them all. If I want to know, do any of these have a known vulnerability? So we can see that we're going to have to upgrade some of these switches or routers because they have a known vulnerability from a cybersecurity perspective. I can see where they are and then work out and assess the risk. All I'm doing is creating my own dashboard. Many other ways of doing it. So let's show you another way. So I might have a computer room here with a number of racks. I might want to color code them and show them. And this is all standard Visio functionality. This bit here is actually creating a macro, and you can, if you know VBA, you can do that, or you can look online. There's lots of people offering help with this. But I may want to create different perspectives, which racks are the busiest. So you see how I'm using this to show capacity, but one diagram is serving multiple purposes. So I hope that gives you just a quick introduction into doing a couple of things in an automated way. Start with a spreadsheet and then use that to create diagrams. And there's many other different ways of doing that. I realize we're getting close to time at the moment, but are there any questions at the moment, Sri, that come in?
Nothing yet, David. And I just want to take the chance to remind everyone that this is being recorded, so it's going to live on in the ITDUG on the ITDUG page as well as YouTube. So you should be able to pull this up quite easily, and even use the website to get hold of David if you need to.
Yeah. Shall I do a little bit more, Sri? Just
Sure,
finish
please.
off. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So show you other ways, and I'll concentrate on the network side. There's lots of other different ways. So we mentioned layers. Layers are a useful way of actually being able to hide information and allow people to bring it in. The same can be applied when we're actually wanting to show things like resilience and failover. So you can see that we have here a device, and it would normally communicate and get through to its virtual desktop environment going these various paths. If I go to layers, what I've done is I've applied various layers that also show here what would happen if there's a failover of maybe a web server or something else, a failover path. So if that's the primary path, I'm invoking those layers. I could do it manually, or I could create radio buttons here, or in this case, checkboxes, so I could see what happens if there's web server failover. I could bring on the firewalls and see which firewalls would have to have the right rule sets to then be able to actually allow that communication. Because we don't just need the primary path, we need to know about failover and allow those things to talk to each other, where we may be going across sites, but they may not be primary. And it's just a way of actually being able to show resilience, but it's a way of using a diagram and showing multiple perspectives just by using data. And all the other techniques are there. So for instance, all of the firewalls that you see here, they all have shape data in them. All of these connectors actually all have those. And this has actually been generated from one of our databases, our AssetGen system, because we often are maybe doing a few hundred of these diagrams and we want to refresh them all. So that's a slightly different technique where our database draws the diagrams for you. But I just really want to concentrate on just standard Visio functionality that you can enable yourself. Those are a couple of things that are quite easy that I thought would probably be useful for yourself. There are many other different ways that you can use this. The only other thing I'll cover, yet again, focusing on the network side, is just one of the utilities we developed, which is really, really useful. And what that does is if I open up here and show I've got a network diagram where I've got lots of parallel connections and uplinks and all the sorts of things you might have in the core of an infrastructure. If I move these around, as you can see there, the connectors don't seem to work very well. They're all hooked into actually a particular position. And so to help you lay out diagrams, what we did is we created in this utility here one called layout connections, which will actually look for the closest paths and rearrange all the connectors, delete the old connection points and add new ones. So it's really useful if you change your layout. If I wanted to move this over here, for instance, because when you're not sure how you want to represent things, you'll often lay things out and put them all together. And if you remove one of these links here, it will then just recalculate and then put them all together. So I hope that would help you, because a lot of people have problems with layouts of diagrams and things and everything all changing. That's going to be normal. You're always going to want to lay things out to be readable. And these are part of the utilities. There's various other things here which are more for our type of work where we're doing large amounts of diagrams in an automated way. And so you have to actually then say it's easy to create a diagram from data, and our own software actually automates the whole process. Then I have the problem of laying it all out. So a lot of these things are all to do with making things a little bit easier to present the information as part of a quote or is maybe actually operational documentation. So I've covered a few things there. There's obviously a lot more. Visio is a very mature product, and I've been doing this for 16 or 17 years. But I hope that's useful for you all.
Yeah, this was
Any
the
other
tip of the
questions, Sri?
iceberg, as they say.
Yeah, there's lots of different things. Just to finish off with, I'll just show you actually how you create a diagram automatically. How would I create this diagram without even linking to a spreadsheet? And so this is now getting into something where you have to be a bit more organized. And that's a challenge for a lot of IT organizations. And this just shows you that all we're doing really is following the same perspective. To actually do a network diagram, this is how we would automate, not just drawing one, but refreshing it. There's lots of things behind the scenes, but really it's all about what we started with the spreadsheet is we filter out what's important to us. And then we then say, I want to use this Visio stencil and template to then actually represent it. So just to explain this option, I'm going to filter out where do we want to start doing a diagram. I'm going to start in this computer room. Where do you want to stop? So the first thing there is you might have an inventory list of the whole world, but you only want to do one building. So the first thing you've got to do is filter things out. The second thing is out of all of that inventory, if it's just the network, you don't really want everything on there. I probably just want the core switches and the edge switches and maybe the routers. Okay. And so actually, yet again, the main thing here is getting to the point where you've actually got what you need for a diagram. And then we just, I'll give it a title at the bottom here, and I'll create a new diagram. And all that this software called Astrogen does is it just filters out all the database, matches up the symbols and the shapes to the Visio template, and then works out all the connections within the database of all the different cables and paths and power and various other things, and then draws it, puts it all on a page for you. And so what would normally take, probably 3 or 4 days to do, I've been able to do, and I can refresh this. The only problem is now I've got to lay it out to make it understandable. And so you can see why we developed those utilities really for ourselves, and then we gave them away and said, that looks really good. But Visio puts all the shapes on top of each other. So that's why we developed that layout connections. So here you can see I've not laid it out probably quite as good as it could be, but that just gives you, it's just using formulas to then work out what's the best way to lay things out and reposition all the connectors. And so depending on how you do things, I hope that just gives you an idea that that same approach applies to doing rack layouts and to do various other types of diagrams. But the key thing here is it allows me to maybe create, I've got a customer maybe with 300 buildings. I want 300 sets of network diagrams updated every week. This is how I do it. I don't type anything.
Even as a layperson,
yeah.
even as a layperson, I can see how incredibly time-saving this is.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, supported by the utility that you was it created in-house? Did you guys?
Yes, that's all what we do in-house. Microsoft's actually a customer of ours. We've done training courses and things for them. But the techniques I've shown you can be applied in many different ways. So this is just showing, sort of failover diagrams, but there's many other different ways that you can basically do the same thing. So here I've got a plan just showing where cameras are, but it's the same technique. I've linked to a spreadsheet or a database, and I've got data embedded in there as to what that camera is and what it is. But of course, we might do a network diagram of the cameras.
Sure.
Other techniques is you might want to show virtual systems. So here I've got physical servers, a virtual cloud, and then virtual servers and applications. And this is more for risk and disaster recovery and things to understand stuff. But it's the same technique, and I hope that just the little bit I've given you makes you think data first, and then a diagram is just a view of data.
Yeah, and you're also at the forefront of creating standard for this, right?
Yes. What's happened is in the States, the Telecoms Industry Association, or the TIA, have, in fact, very quick, because I'm actually doing a presentation tomorrow to the British Computer Society about it all. So I've got this here. And what we're actually doing is, this is my presentation I'm presenting tomorrow, which is how do you understand IT over the long term? So how do you understand and maintain documentation when everybody changes? And what you do is, there's all sorts of different things here, but what we're developing is this standard here called TR60. It has 5 process areas where we write down and allow you to be audited and to recommend what are the processes for planning. I chair the committee for information management, and there are processes. What's the best way to design things, to build and implement? And then there are practice areas. So how do you handle governance? How do you handle security and logistics? There's 18 of us at the moment. We've only been officially approved to do this for the last month or so. I chair the B area. Gary Patton from the US Army is my vice chair. And then our schedule, which you'll see coming out because the TIO are going to publicize this in the next couple of months, is this is the first standard to be released, information management of the technical configurations. So that's basically another term for that is documentation. How do you do good documentation? And then afterwards, we've then got to release governance and cybersecurity. So how do you manage all the governance issues and cybersecurity in larger organizations? And then everybody else gets to do the work in the other committees that once we've got that established, then they can say this is a good way to design. But there's only a limited amount of information at the moment. If you look for TR60, you will see lots of things coming out from us. There's webinars going to be coming. I'm unusual in that I'm the only non-US person doing this. But that's because no one else knows about documentation. But some of the techniques you've seen there are actually going to be covered in here, which is, try and have an inventory. That's a useful thing for documentation, but reuse it not just for asset management and for licenses, reuse it to support diagrams and different schematics and perspectives using some of these techniques. Have process and owners, all the good things that Eureka talk about. All we're doing is writing down a lot of the common sense that you talk about every day and just bringing it to the wider RT world.
Putting it in black and white,
Yeah, so I hope that sort of gives you an idea. This is the only industry strand I know that actually has this as the starting point to support and underpin better planning without site surveys, better implementation without finding there's already something in the rack in the place where you've been told to put it and things.
Wonderful.
So
thank you so much, David. That was wonderful. I know it was a lot to try and address in such a short amount of time, but I think that's a good start. And for anyone who's interested, like I said, squaremilesystems.com. Please give it a check. You can get hold of David quite easily. Thank you to everyone who joined in and watched. And we will be having our next ITDUG webinar on October 26th, the last Wednesday of the month. And it will be on how to make documentation less scary for your employees. So a little bit of Halloween theme there. I have one question coming in. Let me see what this is about. So do we have access to the layout connections thing?
Yes, if you go onto our website and just contact us and say, I would like the Visio utilities, there's a little tick box. We probably get anywhere between 10 to 20 requests a day, but we're just adding in some new stuff. And so we want to sort of send them out to people and just keep them refreshed and updated because we keep getting ideas from people. But we use these utilities. I just did an audit a couple of 6 months ago where we had to do about 3,000 racks of equipment across multiple data centers where I had a team of contractors auditing. So we had to create 3,000 rack diagrams. You can see why I developed these utilities. I don't like doing documentation, never mind as anybody else. So anything that helps me. The fortunate thing I've got is I've got programming resource internally that I can turn to and say, there must be a better way of doing this. Could you do this for me? And hence the reason for the utilities. They've been out for about 4 to 5 years now, I think.
Yeah, we have 4,600 members in ITDUG, and I'm yet to see a comment or a post that says, I love documentation.
I stood up at conferences because I used to be quite high up in the British Computer Society, and I would stand up at conferences. Anybody here like doing documentation? Put your hands up. And nobody would put their hand up, and I'll put my hand up and say, I do. I said, so if you have a poorly documented environment, which is everybody, who are you going to turn to ask for help? For me, this has made me quite a bit of money. I've been running this business for 17 years. I have customers like NASA and MasterCard and New York City and various others as customers. and you don't think there's any value to documentation, fine. Please don't do it. Give me more work. But it is a specialist area, and there comes a point where when you get to a certain size, you have no option. You have to do it. But the same techniques in small environments just mean everything is more efficient and quicker. And so I used to run my own MSP. I used to run voice and data outsourcing, and that's how I got into documentation, because I didn't like paying for unnecessary site surveys. Why not just write down what we built? Sounds simple.
Absolutely.
Good.
Well, thank you
Okay,
again,
Sri.
David. And everyone, see you for the next webinar, last Wednesday of October.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Great. Thank you, everybody.